One morning, someone asked the Buddha, "Why do humans suffer so much?" The Buddha replied, "Do you truly understand what suffering means? Suffering is not just a single feeling. Suffering is a combination of many negative emotions, worry, anger, regret, that grow stronger and spread through the mind. It appears when the self clings tightly to what it desires and resists what is already happening. Now I will tell you the long journey of the universe, so you can understand why this thing called suffering exists in our world. Look back billions of years ago, when Earth was nothing but a giant mass of matter. There was no life, only rocks, water, and wind. It was a world that moved on its own, simple and pure. When a rock broke apart, it did not feel pain. When a wave crashed and disappeared into the shore, it felt no sadness. Everything happened exactly as it should, without judgment, without anyone calling it a loss. Everything kept moving. Volcanoes erupted, land shifted, only an endless exchange of matter. There was no tragedy here. No being stood up and said, "This belongs to me," or cried out, "I have lost it." The truth is very simple. Where there are no feelings, there is no suffering. You see, this teaches us something profound. Suffering is not a built-in part of the universe. It is not a natural law. Suffering only arises when separation begins. When there is no separation, everything returns to being one whole, where every change simply belongs. The very first moment of change came when a small being separated itself from the whole and drew a line around its own existence. It said, "I am here. I am different." In that moment, division was born. Suffering had not yet arrived, but the seed of fear, the fear of losing what it has, had already been planted. From the combination of matter deep within the ocean, a tiny being was born carrying the strongest command of all, the will to live. Imagine this. The very moment it came into existence, it immediately built a thin membrane around itself for protection. That simple act created the first physical boundary. Inside is me, outside is danger. And by drawing that line, it also gave birth to the two most basic needs of all living things, desire and fear. To keep existing, the cell had to constantly seek energy. That was what it needed, and stay away from anything that could destroy it. That was what it feared. The wish to hold on to life, to cling to the fragile shell that surrounded it, became the root of all suffering. This is the truth I once spoke of. The desire to continue living is the source of all suffering. From that very moment, suffering officially became the companion of life. At this early level, suffering was simply a natural alarm system. When a cell was attacked, it sent out signals of pain to warn itself and try to repair the damage. Pain was life's way of saying, "Life is under threat. Take action!" And as living beings grew more complex, with nervous systems and clearer senses, fear too became deeper and more powerful. Look at a small fish. It doesn't just fear the big fish nearby. It also remembers where the big fish once appeared. That memory is the beginning of danger awareness. It begins to expect, to wait for food, to wait for safety. When food doesn't come, it feels disappointment. And from there, suffering moved from being a short physical sensation to a state of mind, built from memory and expectation. The endless struggle to protect that fragile boundary, to defend its separate existence, became the foundation for all anger, fear, and greed that would come later. Because, at its deepest level, suffering is the price life pays for claiming and protecting the sense of self, the personal I. When your ancestors first stood upright, it was not only a change of posture, it was a giant leap in awareness. The human brain began to develop a special ability, the power to think beyond the present moment. From that instant, humans separated themselves from animals, because now you could replay the past and imagine the future in your own mind. Animals live only in the present. Their fear ends the moment danger passes. But you are different. You have memory. And that very memory makes you relive mistakes from 10 years ago and punish yourself again in this moment. You cling to joys that are already gone, and that clinging turns into lasting sadness. This kind of suffering does not come from the outside world, but from your own mind. It is not real in this room, yet it feels completely real inside your head. At the same time, your mind can create the worst scenarios for the future. Worry is no longer a reaction to actual danger, but a reaction to the inner images you draw about an uncertain tomorrow. Suffering multiplies from there because it is no longer limited by time or space. You suffer from the mental pictures you create yourself. Intelligence gives you the ability to see farther and understand more. But without wisdom, it becomes an invisible trap that locks your spirit. You begin to build stories about who you are. I am successful. I must have this. And when reality no longer matches that story, you suffer. You fear losing your honor. You fear others will think badly of you. You fear not meeting expectations. All these fears are products of a mind that has grown too much. The ability to think opened a vast horizon for you, but at the same time, it also imprisoned you inside the very cage of your thoughts. And from this point on, suffering is no longer just a problem of the body, but has become a deep pain of the spirit, a burden that lives within your own heart. When humans began to work together and build the first cities, civilization was born. Along with it, people created a system where greed, anger, and ignorance were not only present, but also legitimized, refined, and organized within every layer of society. In nature, greed was simply storing food to survive. But in civilization, greed turned into an endless craving for power, wealth, and recognition. Humans invented the ideas of ownership and social class, and in that moment, injustice came into existence. Suffering was no longer the body's hunger for food, but the soul's hunger born from comparison. You saw someone having more than you, and inside you arose a sense of lack, a feeling of relative emptiness. Civilization also drew new boundaries, geographic lines between nations, and social lines between the rich and the poor. From then on, suffering became a tool to maintain order. The weak suffered from exploitation. The strong suffered from the fear of losing their wealth and position. And every time you built a taller tower or invented new technology, you unknowingly built another layer of suffering, more refined, harder to see. Anger was organized into armies, ignorance was framed into ideologies, and in that endless cycle, humans slowly forgot who they truly were. I once told you, it is not the world that makes humans suffer, but their failure to understand themselves. The material world is neutral. It is the way you assign value, the way you constantly compare, that creates true suffering. Civilization built a social ladder that has no top. You spend your whole life climbing steps set by others, believing that if you go higher, you will be happier. But once you reach it, you still feel lacking, still afraid, still not enough. Civilization gives you comfort, yet also chains you with invisible expectations. And within that brilliance, you lose your inner freedom. After creating so much suffering through complex societies, humans began to look back and ask, why did this happen? It was the era of great thinkers and the explosion of human intellect. From Greece, philosophers used reasoning and logic to seek truth and order in the world. From India, sages turned inward to find meaning and the path to liberation. The Bible, the Quran, the Buddhist sutras, all were maps created by humanity to explain injustice and pain. Each system promised a way out. Some promised rewards after death. Others offered formulas to decode this world. Among them, I presented a completely different view. I did not promise to erase suffering by changing the outer world. Instead, I taught you to look directly at it. I said that suffering is an undeniable truth, and it is your greatest teacher. Think about it. If life were always perfect, would you ever stop to ask what it truly means? It is pain, loss, disappointment, and emptiness that force you to awaken. They are the driving force behind every great search in human history. I once said, suffering is the greatest teacher, for through it, you awaken. Suffering is not an obstacle, but a doorway leading you to a deeper understanding of yourself. This search marks the line between belief and awareness. Belief is when you cling to a promise, a ready-made answer from outside. Awareness is when you accept your pain in the present moment and use it as a tool to see how your mind truly works. The understanding born from within, not escape, not denial, is the most complete, profound, and lasting answer to your suffering. You are living in an age of ultimate comfort, where technology has advanced beyond imagination and promises happiness to humankind. But instead of joy, you now witness more loneliness, depression, and loss of meaning. Suffering has changed its shape, from material hunger in the past to emotional and digital pain in the present. In this era, suffering comes from endless comparison on social media. You no longer fear hunger, but fear being left behind. Fear not matching the perfect life others display. That fear is what people today call FOMO, the fear of missing out. The pressure to succeed, to be rich, to stay constantly busy, has drained your energy without you even realizing it. Modern society sets unreachable goals, making you feel that you're never good enough, never fast enough, never worthy enough. There's a bitter truth. You can fly among the stars thanks to technology, yet still don't know how to stop and touch your own soul in silence. You have a phone that connects you to the whole world, yet you feel lonely even when sitting beside your loved ones. The suffering of this age is not from lack of food, but from lack of time to feel, lack of a pause to breathe, and lack of genuine connection from the heart. Comfort has quietly stolen your ability to endure. When everything becomes too easy, you lose patience with small things. You try to fill the emptiness inside by consuming, shopping, entertainment, food, or endless scrolling. But the more you try to fill it, the larger the emptiness becomes, because nothing outside can heal a wound that lies deep within the soul. The suffering of the modern age is the clearest proof that every external solution fails before an internal problem. You have reached the final limit of searching for happiness in the material world, yet have not once stopped to ask yourself, what am I truly searching for? When you realize that all external solutions fail to bring lasting peace, there is nowhere else to look but within, and so humanity began to turn back. The moment you start looking inside, seeking stillness and listening to your own being, it shows that you've accepted a simple truth. The true source of suffering does not lie in the world, but begins within yourself. This marks a great turning point in human awareness. Instead of asking, what must I fix in the world? You begin to ask, where is this suffering being created? And then you see that no matter how perfect the world becomes, if your mind still resists, refusing to accept what is, and still clings, demanding things to be different, suffering will continue. I have said, suffering exists and gains power through your resistance. You suffer because you keep saying, I don't want to feel this way, but that very resistance gives suffering more strength. Turning inward is not an escape, but an act of courage, facing the root of the problem directly. You begin to create a small space between the one who observes, you, and the emotions that arise, what is observed. When that space appears, you are no longer swept away by emotional waves, but simply aware of them. The true purpose of self-observation is to reveal the temporary and illusory nature of suffering. You clearly see that suffering is not an enemy coming from outside, but one you have nurtured inside the house of your own mind. It lives on your reactions, your clinging, and your resistance. And when you finally see where the real enemy resides, inside the mind, not in the world, that is the final and most important step in understanding why humans suffer so deeply. At the end of this long evolution, you will see that suffering is not a mistake, but an essential part of life's movement. Just as Earth follows the cycle of birth, decay, and rebirth, your life also follows its own pattern. Suffering, understanding, letting go, peace. Suffering is like sandpaper that sharpens and clarifies you. Without hardship, you would remain asleep in comfort, never seeking deeper meaning in life. Those painful moments are the only force that pushes you to search for truth, and they teach you about the constant change of all things. Realizing the truth does not mean you stop feeling pain. It means you stop suffering because of it. You will still feel sadness when losing something, still feel disappointment when failing, but you will no longer create stories like everything is ruined or I am a failure forever. Instead, you see emotions as waves that come and go. No resistance, no holding on. You accept change because you understand that everything is temporary, even the deepest sorrow. Enlightenment, or awakening, is simply realizing that the self you've been protecting, the I, born from part 1, is not a solid stone, but a flowing stream of experiences. When you stop clinging to the idea of a permanent self, there is nothing left to lose. And in that moment, suffering naturally dissolves, like clouds fading under sunlight. I end with the core message. I did not come to erase suffering. I came to show you that suffering itself is the path home. Because suffering is the very road that leads you back to your true nature, to the ever-changing rhythm of life, and to the deep peace within. A peace untouched and unmoved by anything in the outer world.